Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about reflective supervision for FDR practitioners and mediators. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we live and work and pay my respects to elders past and present. The long history and living legacy of Aboriginal culture reminds us that wisdom is carried and strengthened through storytelling, mentoring, and guidance from elders. And that's always been the way that knowledge has passed from one generation to the next until the last few generations. That's part of what reflective supervision offers us in our work as mediators. It gives us a chance to pause, to reflect, and share responsibility for keeping our practice strong and ethically aligned. So as we begin today, let's hold that perspective of shared learning, collective responsibility in mind. I'm Joanne Law, Director of Mediation Institute. I've been developing a supervision course with my colleague Lee. We both train and support FDR practitioners and mediators at Mediation Institute and provide guidance to new mediators and also supervision for experienced practitioners. So if you wouldn't mind using the chat, what's your experience with supervision? I imagine most of you are already supporting others informally or perhaps formally in other roles. At the end of this session, I'll share a little bit about how you can formalise that skill with recognition in the mediation sector. The message I wanted to make sure we're clear about is that supervision in mediation isn't about checking up, it's really around lifting up practitioners and practice. I presented recently at the National Mediation Conference and some of the feedback was, we should use a different term. We shouldn't call it supervision. I've reflected on that and we're going to stick with supervision so that people know what we're talking about, but we're going to call it reflective supervision. So very much around the role of the supervisor, being that mirror, helping people to take the time out to reflect on their practice and opportunities for improvement. One of the concerns in our profession, one of the major challenges is that we do work privately and often it can become quite isolated, particularly for people that aren't part of an organisation. That can lead to problems. So supervision is really an opportunity for that, getting together to share that hidden cost of going it alone. Our work can have a high emotional load. With limited support, there's a real risk of potential burnout. I see good quality supervision as one of the solutions to try and prevent that and support the longevity of practice. This concept of reflective supervision, and what I'm really talking about is that reflective space, a structured reflective space for learning and to support professional resilience. The model that we're teaching, we're calling it the tripod method. It's really focused on 3 legs: learning, the formative aspect, accountability. We are constrained by obligations that we have if you're an accredited mediator under the MDRAS standards, and if you're an FDR practitioner under the FDR regs and family law obligations that we have. It is an important part of our role. The third leg, which is equally important, is wellbeing. So that restorative aspect of supervision, of helping people to debrief, to manage the emotional load of the work. We've developed this based on the feedback we've been getting in the research that we've done around what's happening out there with supervision. Sometimes the accountability, the crossovers between line management and supervision get blurred or not understood, which can cause problems, as can failing to get an appropriate balance. It might be a moment to reflect on those 3 legs, and they're joined by reflection. Which aspects of those feel the strongest in your current supports? Is there that balance? Looking at that a little bit more. So with the learning, we're looking at building skills, reflection and confidence, answering that question, what did I do well? What can I try differently? With the accountability, it assures that ethics are recognised and upheld and maintains professional integrity. And we're thinking about, was my approach ethical and procedurally fair? Did I comply with my obligations? And how could I do that more effectively. Wellbeing supports resilience and sustainability in the field. How am I managing the emotional load of this work? And making sure that people have strategies and support in place. And again, if you are already a supervisor, maybe just reflect on which leg you tend to lean on the most, and if any of those legs might need strengthening. The core is always that reflective practice. That's where insight meets the practical aspects. I do have a couple of scenarios, and I would appreciate it if you use the chat to think about some of the strategies that you may think about in the scenarios. So this is a typical situation that happens in supervision, staying on the surface. The mediator turns up to the supervision but only shares the safe cases. So they avoid talking about the really challenging ones because they don't want to look like they're struggling. So what do you think might help turn this into an experience that really lifts practice? You can use the chat. If we think about those three legs, or maybe there's something else you think about, what do you think might be missing that the mediator doesn't feel like it's safe for them to talk about their challenges?
It sounds like they might not have had supervision experiences previously where they have felt like it's been safe to offload. So I think in terms of the supervisory role, it would be one of the curiosity kind of questioning you'd be asking, like what, where, why, when, what happened? Tell me about what happened from your point of view. How did that make you feel? Going into the learning element of the tripod, and then often that reflection back of this is what went well, this is not what went. Also offering compassion and empathy that this is a really actually difficult role, and it's helpful to talk about things when you're ready.
So the learning one, we can definitely go deeper there. But, perhaps that's that restorative wellbeing leg that's missing a little bit. So if the supervisee doesn't feel psychologically safe, they're not going to disclose vulnerability. So they're going to, everything's fine. We're all going well. So without that emotional containment, that trust, supervision just becomes a compliance or a performance exercise, not real deep reflective learning. And it can even be the accountability legs missing because people are fearful to talk about their ethical dilemmas or the things they're struggling with because they don't want to appear like they don't know, it may not be safe. So one of the things that we've really reflected on is establishing that supervision alliance, the framework and guidelines so that people know what is going to be safe. In reflective supervision, the transformative conversations, sharing of what really matters can only happen if the supervisee feels safe. Otherwise, it's really not going to happen. Thank you. Here's another example. The practitioner leaves the supervision feeling like they were checked up on rather than supported. They start dreading the sessions and contribute less each time. What would need to change to make the supervision feel empowered and growth focused? From this tripod model, that accountability, that normative leg may have taken over. So too much focus on monitoring compliance or critique and too little attention to that restorative side or reflective learning. If the supervisor jumps in to tell, this is what you should have done, this is how it should be, it doesn't really give space for authenticity and growth. So what we end up with the supervisee experiencing evaluation anxiety instead of that reflective safety that's really needed for supervision. Any thoughts on how you might reset this or make improvements?
I think you might have to go back and revisit your supervision agreement to start rebuilding that trust again and having some form of toolkit, kind of like a framework to use and then to follow until such times where the trust is rebuilt. But I would find, in my experience, I find it quite difficult to rebuild that trust when you've got this kind of supervisor, to be quite honest.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be challenging for a supervisee if they've got someone who doesn't understand the purpose of supervision as a collaborative, reflective space. Going back to the supervision agreement, if there is one, or asking for one, may be possible. Again, it's not always safe, and it may be the need to change supervisors and reset with an explicit start next time. It's really, to reset, there's a real need for getting that balance back around wellbeing, making sure it is psychologically safe, and also realising that learning doesn't from telling people. It occurs when people accept the need for change and identify how that could look in their life. When that accountability leg dominates, it can badly affect the environment. We need to make sure that supervision isn't some sort of compliance check. Another common scenario is that supervision's just used for venting. So mediator uses their supervision time mainly for venting about difficult clients. After the session, they feel quite good. They got it off their chest, but nothing's changed in their practice because it's all about the clients and how difficult they are, not about the tools and strategies they may be able to use. What are some thoughts about how this practitioner could shift from release to real growth in supervision?
It sounds like there's a little bit of the accountability area of the supervision missing, so strengthening the accountability. And in terms of the difficult clients, the practitioner or the supervisor can reflect back, how do you think they're feeling? Why do you think they're feeling that way? Can you give me a bit more of an idea of what's happening for them to try and invoke that empathy from the supervisee to help them feel that? And what did you do in this element? What could you do differently next time? So just putting a real shift on the accountability stream of that reflective.
Yeah, absolutely. And the learning as well, because if there's no movement, if it's the same thing each time, it's not really supervision. It's not really making that difference that we want to see in helping people to elevate their practice. So yeah, probably overdone with the wellbeing. Feels good. And that's not to say debriefing isn't important and essential for our resilience and wellbeing, but it's certainly not supervision just doing that. There needs to be space for that debrief where it's needed, but it would be much more helpful if the supervisor doesn't overemphasize the empathy and then shifts into, what's the reflective. And there's a number of different models you can use. Kolb gives the eyes, but we want to move from storytelling to making sense of that. So asking what are the patterns, what alternative approaches could make a difference. From that tripod point of view, we're really looking at what can happen if one of those needs a lot of holding up, a tripod with one leg. And often in this type of supervision, it becomes more of a support session or counselling, which isn't what it should be. So I guess we've looked at a few of the choices that we all face in supervision, whether you're the supervisor or supervisee, whether to stay safe or go deep. As a supervisor, it's our job to make it a safe space so that people can be vulnerable. They can't and shouldn't be vulnerable if it isn't safe. Whether we feel judged or seek empowerment, how much control can we take over the situation if it's not meeting our needs? As advisors, it's our role to build that trust and curiosity so that people are able to explore how they could do things differently. As supervisors, how can we help them turn those emotional reactions into insights? Is there a lack of self-awareness about triggering? Is there some other work that they may need to do if certain types of clients are getting them into a turbulent emotional state? Ultimately, supervision is a relationship, and all parties in a relationship have a certain amount of ownership and responsibility to make it that space of real growth. The balance that we get in supervision isn't accidental. It's something we need to work on. From my point of view, reflective supervision really matters because it helps us to sharpen our decision making in complex cases. It clarifies our thinking and professional judgment. It reduces stress for practitioners and emotional load and strengthens confidence and professional longevity. When supervision is used poorly, it can do the opposite. It can undermine practitioners' confidence and can even result in them leaving the sector, which I've unfortunately seen. I've used a picture of cogs, but we're not cogs. We're not interchangeable. We are conscious drivers of a process or a system, and we grow through reflection, not repetition. Doing the same thing over and over again doesn't make us a better practitioner. It's really evaluating what we're doing and the outcomes we're getting, and considering with curiosity and support what we might try differently. And look, it is really important because it's not venting to say that clients have become more complex and difficult in some ways. Society is going through some massive changes, and we've all lived collectively through the trauma of the COVID times. We all need that support to help our practice. I'll quickly go through what we've designed as this course on reflective supervision. So it does factor in a statement of attainment for a unit of competence. There isn't actually a qualification or unit in the Australian framework for supervision for mediation. So we've brought in one of the units on debriefing, which is also a part of the training and relevance, so workplace debriefing and support processes. We're also issuing a Mediation Institute Reflective Supervision Certificate of Competence. Foundations, establishing the supervision relationship, and that's where we look at the supervision agreement and the process to co-create that and get that in place. It's not something that's imposed, it should be something that's discussed. The reflective balance feedback model, so that's an evolution of the feedback sandwich, which is more appropriate and mapped to that tripod model. Debriefing in mediation practice, then we go through a number of the common models, so the seven-eyed model, Kolb experiential learning, and Gibbs reflective cycle, so that you've got some of those models that you can use to go in deeper. And for those that aren't working internally, we've got a module on the practicalities of working professionally as a supervisor as well. That's the overview.
Where do I find that? Is that in the Mediation Institute's forum, or where in the platform is it?
The information about the course?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I think is needed is this concept of being reflective leaders. What we've developed with this model is fully online so that people can join from anywhere around the country. There's quiz, capacity building through live reflective circles with the other participants on the course, and mentoring, workplace integration and practitioner-led. The evidence is going to come from real supervision sessions, and that forms the core of your assessment evidence. We're making sure that you understand the theory, but you can also do the practice. For those that aren't in a workplace situation where you have people that you can supervise, we've got a process to invite volunteers from among our members, so we can pair you up with someone who's willing for you to supervise and provide feedback. So even if you're starting out and you haven't got access to clients, you'll have that chance to practice authentically rather than just simulations. Because, from our experience in delivering the graduate diploma, there's really no comparison to working with real client situations once you've fully absorbed the process. And again, we're verifying competence with the unit of competence. It is one of the electives from the graduate diploma, but generally we wouldn't be offering this as entry-level training unless someone is perhaps already in a manager role or good experience with supervision. So it'd be by exception that we'd offer this as a part of the graduate diploma. With the enrolment details, we're launching the course towards the end of October. It's open for expressions of interest in enrolments now. The fee is $2,200, including the statement of attainment, $1,980 for Mediation Institute members. We do have a payment plan. It doesn't take 6 months to complete, but we're providing 6 months access so that you're able to join the sessions and the group work for as long as you like as you're going through the process. I've just about finished the presentation, and then I've got my little cameras out there watching with her. I think, the focus we've got throughout the training is getting balance between those three elements: learning, accountability to our standards if you're an accredited mediator, and looking at supervision for the mediators within your organisation, or an FDR practitioner, and holding people accountable to the obligations we have under family law, and wellbeing. Without a strong focus on that, it can become a punitive approach or not something that is helpful. So just put that up on the screen for anyone who does want to get in touch. Any questions or comments? We'll put this as well